What's going on, y'all? KM Best here. I know it's early, but I think this deck might have what it takes to take on everything the developing metagame has to come. That's right, it's Wixie, and this has been a, sort of tertiary archetype for a while now. It's been what I think people could reasonably call the second, the third, the fourth best archetype for Wiccan. So what is it that changed that made it good right now specifically? I think a couple things that have changed recently that have really contributed to the rise of this deck in my eyes are A, the Loki nerf, and B, the rise of decks looking to beat Wiccan decks with big dudes, Cull Obsidian Skaar decks, Mockingbird decks, things like that. And the key thing that all of those decks have in common is if you're playing a Skaar deck, you're playing a Mockingbird deck, you're very, very weak to Mobius M. Mobius. Now, you might think, Mobius, oh, I should be playing that in the Loki meta. That wasn't really true when Loki was a 3-5 because the trade-off was just so bad. And now we're in a situation where instead of you just playing Loki being better than this actually has a very real upside in the current metagame as a generically strong deck with a powerful game plan attached to it that actually has the one card in the game that turns your very bad matchup into a very reasonably good matchup. Now, I know there are going to be people watching this who are going to ask about budget substitutions, and so I wanted to jump into that really quick because I actually do think that this deck is very flexible and there are plenty of substitutions that you can make for a variety of the cards in them without meaningfully impacting your ability to play this archetype as a whole. So let's talk about that first. Silver Sable is absolutely a flex slot. I think there are basically three good options here: Spider-Ham, Silver Sable, and of course Hydra Bob, and they run on sort of a spectrum from Spider-Ham being the most interactive with the least power, Silver Sable being a little bit interactive with more power, and Hydra Bob not being interactive at all, but having 5 power. I think any of those is a viable slot in there. I think if you don't have any of them, it gets a little bit harder. You kind of maybe want to be like the Hood plus Viper deck at that point, and then you start thinking maybe my 5-drop should be Annihilus. Not really sure, but that's also worth looking into. The point I'm trying to make here is you shouldn't feel like you can't play this deck without Silver Sable. Mirage is absolutely a flex spot. I think in the real world, she honestly should probably be Kate Bishop, but I played this deck with Mirage, I played this deck with Kate, I played this deck with Cable, and I didn't feel like a super meaningful difference among all of them. I think it's likely that Kate Bishop is the strongest option here, but I don't think it's the kind of thing that should prevent you from playing this deck in a meaningful way. I should also mention that if you feel the need to really guarantee that you want to get your stuff off, you can try putting something in like a Kitty Pride to make sure that you actually get to your Wiccan. I just think that's not necessarily something that I feel the need to do, but you absolutely can go for a 4th 1-drop here if you want. I'm not sure it's what I would do, and I'm not sure this is the slot I would do it in. On to the 3-drops. Mobius, of course, irreplaceable in your Pixie Mobius deck, but you should be able to play something instead of Speed or Copycat. They are basically just generic good cards here. If you want to build more towards being a Viper White Widow deck, you can actually try to make that happen. You can include a Clog sub-theme. Again, you might not want to be a Pixie deck if you do this. There's a lot of flexibility in Wiccan decks. But the basic thing I'm trying to get across here is if you want to play, I don't know, Red Guardian and Nocturne, no one's going to be like, oh, that's unplayable. You're just going to be prepared for different situations and a little bit worse at just curving out. This deck is built to just curve out. That's what it's really trying to do. And so it is to some degree optimized for that. However, you don't have to have the exact same choices and preferences that I do in terms of just curving out. You just have to have cards that you're happy to play on turn 3. And while I do think replacing these with Red Guardian and Nocturne, not the best idea, replacing them with Gladiator, yeah, it's going to be a little bit worse. But it's not going to be the end of the world. I think you could even go as low as Polaris before it becomes the end of the world when it comes to playing something like this. Legion is extremely replaceable. Legion is a very easy card to replace in these lists. You can go 2 ways with it. The first is replace it with another 5-drop. If you're running the Hood, you might want to look at Annihilus. You might want to look at trying to figure out how to get Sentry Annie into a shell like this. You might want to look at Cersei or something like that. You might want to look at a Claw if you want just a generic strong card there. The other direction to go is run a different early drop. So get a Kate Bishop in here, or if you replace Mirage with Kate Bishop, you get a Mirage in here, or you get another 3 in here, or you get another 1 in here, you get a Jeff in here. There's a bunch of different options for this slot. It's like a very true flex slot here. And I don't want anyone to look at this and be like, oh, can't play it. With that said, let's jump into the card-by-card breakdown and talk about what the cards in this list actually do. Silver Sable is a very powerful one-drop. One of the things I noticed about having Spider Ham in here, which I think is the most common replacement for Silver Sable, is there is a genuine combo of like Spider Ham Copycat, now you know 2 cards you don't have to play around, where if you're a good player, I think you can get a lot more value out of that than other players might. I think in a generic situation, I would prefer playing Silver Sable because points really do matter in a metagame like this. When you are able to put a card that has even a nominal amount of points on the board, it's just going to make things a lot easier for you. I know this sounds reductive, but 3 points is actually 3 times as many points as Spider Ham. And while the Spider Ham utility is and can be greater if it hits something that really matters, and the information can be used by good players, I do think that it's likely that over the larger form of the ladder, you'll get more out of just playing a Silver Sable, playing a Hydra Bob, just something that does something good or is big. Maria Hill is absolutely core in every single Wiccan deck, maybe more core than literally any other card. She's just amazing. Like, this is your perfect one-drop opener. She gives you a one-drop, gives you a two-drop, and then you have so many 3s, so many 1s and 2s, that once you have Maria Hill, it is just very difficult to imagine a scenario where you do not have access to Wiccan on turn 4, which enables your best draws in the deck. I do think that Maria Hill is just an absolute slam dunk. The major overlap of Wiccan and Pixie is that both of them want you running a lot of early cards and then some 6-drops, right? The deck building constraints that both of them put you in are, we want good results early and late. And being an early and late deck works with both Wiccan, in case you don't actually get the Pixie stuff going on, you can just play those cards normally, and with Pixie, because now you have 1-drops in your deck to switch with your 6-drops. The more cheap stuff you have in your deck, the more guaranteed that when you draw one of those 6-drops it's going to be something that's unfair, like a 1-cost Alioth or Magneto. And so these decks have similar incentives, which allows them to merge well. I think there are archetypes where like playing a Maria Hill would be a cost, but in a deck like this that just wants a certain amount of 1-drops for both of the strategies, it's not a cost at all. Nico Minoru is just generically strong. I think Nico is right up there with Maria, probably a little bit below that in the just like, we love 1-drops in this deck camp. I do think that I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to just running like a kitty in here just to make sure things happen the way you want them to, but it's not the best option you have. I prefer this version of the list where we're just saying, look, we need a 1-drop. Most of the times we don't get Wiccan, it's because we miss a 1-drop. It's a lot rarer for us to do it because we miss a 2-drop. We have not only a bunch of 2-drops in the deck, we also have the ability to get a 2-drop from Maria Hill. We also have the ability to play 1-drop, 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 right? So if we get the Maria Hill, or if we just get 1-drop into 2-drop, there's just a lot of things that happen. And then having 3-3-drops, this is actually the thing that allowed us to, I think, in my opinion, consider cutting Kate Bishop, even though I wouldn't recommend it. This is the version of the deck I played, and so I'm talking about the version of the deck I played rather than the one I think is, like, potentially better, but I didn't actually test very well. And basically what I'm getting at here is drawing 2 cards makes you more likely to be able to play the cards you want. Copying a card makes you more likely to be able to get to Wiccan as well. And so this is a card that, while not as good as something like Maria Hill at giving you Wiccan enablers, it is doing that a decent amount of the time. And again, you just really want 1-drops in the deck. Pixie's dope as hell, but I typically bring this combo of Pixie Mobius out when Mobius is good, and that is no exception right now. One of the best ways to beat a Wiccan deck writ large, like pretty much every Wiccan deck, is meaningfully weak into Sasquatch, Mockingbird, Skaar decks, which are just going to match your Alioth on the final turn and say, I don't care about that at all. Having a Mobius in the deck is the best way to actually not be completely unfavored in that matchup, and I think it is genuinely important that we have real power behind that Mobius as well, because we need to be able to stop our opponents from doing the thing that really does counter us. I do consider that a counter matchup to the Wiccan decks, and of the Wiccan decks, because this one has Pixie Mobius in that, it is best able to A, have Mobius and deal with what they're doing, and B, have explosive power because of Pixie. This is probably the objectively worst decision I've made in the deck. I originally started playing it with Cable. I literally have no idea why it was better with Cable and Mirage than with Kate Bishop. No idea whatsoever. I'm just going to chalk it up to variance. I do think that Kate Bishop is the best use of this slot, but clearly I haven't felt anything bad happening to me from not doing that. And Mirage is like actually kind of similar to Kate in that she's going to very often give you a card that you're going to be able to meaningfully play and get into your curve. One of the things that I really noticed about this list, though, was like I kind of constantly had a 3-drop in my hand, and so it was really more about getting through the 1 and 2. It's like we run 3-3-drops, we're pretty likely to see one by the time turn 3 rolls around, and we've drawn 6 cards. It felt like it happened just very, very consistently, even though I don't know exactly how the math lines up on that. And this card was just like enough or good enough to add other playables to our hand as the game wore on. I do think that while Kate Bishop is probably the best slot in here, it is not the best by a vast margin, because when she's not giving you like acid arrow, grapple arrow, like when you have these where it's like Pim arrow and Hawkeye arrow, you're just like, God, this sucks. I hate playing both of these cards. It's not bad, but it's like there's a pretty big delta with Kate, and there's not a delta with Mirage. But the point I'm making here is like, if you didn't get the season pass, I do think you can probably still play this deck with Mirage, with Cable, even with Jeff, maybe. The reason we're playing Mobius in our Wiccan deck is because of that counter matchup. The Sasquatch deck, the Mockingbird deck, the Skaar deck, it's all the same deck, right? Like, it's just a deck that is very good into Wiccan stuff or it is obviating the end game of this deck, which is like, we want to really rely on Alioth, we don't really have Shang-Chi and stuff like that. And so we just kind of get run over by a deck that is able to meaningfully play 25 points on the final turn of the game that is not Aliothable. And I think that's sort of the key, right? There are plenty of decks that can play 25 points on the final turn of the game. Bounce is really good at that, but all of Bounce's points are Aliothable, and all of the points in a Skaar deck are not Aliothable. And that's kind of the key here. Mobius is what drags them back down to earth, and Pixie is what puts our power output above them. Speed's just big as hell. He's really, really big, and that's really all I'm looking for. I'm looking for size, I'm looking for numbers, I'm looking for beef. Speed is the biggest, beefiest 3-drop out there right now. Gladiator's kind of close some of the time, and there's honestly not a huge amount of downside to Gladiator. Like, sometimes you'll hit your opponent's Alioth and be sad, sometimes you'll hit your opponent's Magneto and be sad, and sometimes he's like notably unplayable in the matchups against the Skaar decks. And so speed ends up being like better, I think, in a meaningful way. I don't necessarily think it's like worth getting caches for. That seems kind of a ridiculous proposition to me, that anything is worth getting caches right now when Madam Web is coming out. But if you do have him, I mean, like, he's just great. He's just a big, beefy 3. That's exactly what we thought he was going to be. He's just, one of the best big 3s you can possibly play. Almost always a 3-7, 3-8, 3-9. That's bigger than everything else. Very little downside. People who acted like this card died somehow because it no longer says steal the bottom card of your opponent's deck are just ridiculous to me. This is a very strong card still. When we talked about how 1-drops sort of in this deck worked on a sliding scale from like Spider-Ham at utility, Silver Sable at a combination of utility and size, and then Hydra Bob at size. In this analogy, the Hydra Bob would be speed, and this would be the Silver Sable, where it's just like, this is just never actually bad. It's just never bad. Just a great card all the time. 3-5, information upside, sometimes better than what the 3-5 rate is if you're taking anything decent. I can't tell you how many times I've had my opponents copycat my Dr. Doom in like Sandman decks. You're just like, oh my god, I cannot win. Copycat Magneto, copycat Alioth. There are so many good targets for this card and so few genuinely bad ones. They do exist, right? But it has to be actively bad, like Blade or Kitty Pryde, in order for this card to be worse than a 3-5. So most of the time, this card is better than a 3-5, and the fail states are, it's a 3-5, and then the real fail states are, okay, I can't play this, but it's a strong-ass card. Someone asked me recently if Wiccan had supplanted Loki, and I do think in terms of like cards I love, I think that's like a reasonable way to say it, but what's really happening here, what they're actually describing, is not my subjective opinion. It's more that Wiccan is becoming the backbone of mid-range decks in a real and powerful way. And it overlaps with Pixie in a really legitimate deck-building way, because where another mid-range deck, a Hope Summers style mid-range deck, doesn't overlap with Pixie the same way, because it doesn't have the same ability to skyrocket 6-drops out. Wiccan bridges the gap between, oh, I didn't do my Pixie, well, I guess I can still play my 6-drops because I played Wiccan, right? Like, you end up with 2 real high roll moves here, and I think that's a really important part of why this deck makes sense, because it aligns the deck building incentives of Pixie Mobius with the deck building incentives of Wiccan in a very meaningful and easy way. And I think that a lot of outside factors like Mobius being good and I really want to be playing that card anyway kind of thing have motivated this. And it shouldn't require a lot to make like the case for Wiccan here. But when that person is talking about has this card become, the new Loki for KM Best, it's like the new mid-range core. Like that's what this card is about. And I always like those things. I love Legion, but like this is the world's most replaceable card. You can replace it with anything from another 1-drop to another 2-drop to another 5-drop to pick a card. It does not matter. Like this is the single most replaceable slot. If you have a card you want to play in here, put it in here for Legion. Go nuts. You're probably going to be fine. I like him fine, but like I could have gone for like Hood, Annihilus, swap one of the 3-drops out for Viper, and then suddenly, like, okay, instead of playing Silver Sable, I have Hood. Instead of playing, let's say Copycat, probably, I would have Viper, and then I have Annihilus here, and then suddenly I'm just like, getting some free roll stuff off. I have counters to my opponent's Clog. That is almost certainly totally fine. Like, there is almost no way that is bad. So I kind of think that it's like, you should probably just do whatever you want here. You have like Claw if you want a generically strong guy. There's just a million different options you can do here. Tons of stuff to play with. Very strong card, but very replaceable. Alioth, on the other hand, is not very replaceable. This is your BS Be Gone card. Oh, your opponent is like wonging you? They're not wonging you anymore. You're getting Phoenix Force, they can actually still do that to you. But if they miss the Phoenix Force and you Wiccan and then you can blow up their Nimrod, suddenly you're fine, right? Like there's a lot of just random decks that you would otherwise have absolutely no interaction to that you can just sort of suddenly randomly beat with an Alioth. And that's just a really important thing to have. You just like randomly get people with this while also not really paying a meaningful size tax here because 10 is still big enough to win lanes a lot of the time. And you're not even paying the typical Alioth tax of, oh, well, it's the only card you play this turn, because it's not the only card you play this turn, because you also play, like, I don't know, a 1-drop and another 1-drop, or whatever you got from Mirage. Or if you're playing Kate Bishop, you play like 2 Kate Bishop arrows, and it's like, oh, I'm not paying a tax on this at all, because I have 8 energy because of Wiccan, and somehow I'm playing like Alioth and then also Grapple Arrow and Pim Arrow to fill up another lane, so I'm playing Alioth 1 lane, 7 power in another, and it's like, all right, I don't really know what they're supposed to do about that. This deck gets rid of Alioth's biggest weaknesses and builds for Alioth's greatest strengths. That's to say absolutely nothing of when you Pixie this card, which is super dumb, because a 2 or 3 cost Alioth is very ridiculous. Magneto is our other 6-drop of choice. You can kind of flex this guy around. I do think Magneto is the best option. Dr. Doom is a thought. Ultron is a thought. Ultimately, Magneto is the one that I have come to the conclusion of as being the best option for pairing alongside Alioth. And again, a lot of the same things that I said about Alioth apply here. This is a disruptive card that can give you interactive tools against decks that you would otherwise be unable to interact with. You can clog lanes. Again, that is a type of interaction. You can disrupt Wong stuff. You can disrupt all sorts of things with this card that you would otherwise have no meaningful way to interact with. And as a bonus, it is very, very large. Great when you Pixie it. Great when you are able to Wiccan it out early. This is a card that interacts and is big, and that is what this deck needs from its big guys. All right, y'all, thank you so much for making it through that video. I hope you enjoy, and I hope you understand from this one more than any other video I've ever made, just how many cards are genuinely replaceable here. Like, this is not a situation where, like, there are wholly irreplaceable cards. Like, okay, you don't have Pixie Mobius. That's fine. You can still probably play a Wiccan deck, right? You can just build it in a different kind of way to have a different group of matchups. That's totally, totally fine. If you don't have Wiccan, yeah, it's a little hard to play a Wiccan deck. But right now, I would point out that this archetype is actually friendly to just sort of building how you want to build it for what you want to target. So whether or not you have every card or not, you should be able to build a version of this list as long as you basically like have the card Wiccan. Like, it should be functional enough once you get to that point. as long as you follow the principles we talked about in this video. I really hope you enjoyed what we've talked about so far. If you did, like and subscribe. Please remember to do that. And final bonus, I wasn't expecting to ever do something like this, but Medify gave me an excellent deal. They basically effectively are allowing me to operate a sort of Patreon style page on their website, and I get 100% of everything you send there. I know people on YouTube have asked for me to turn on like donations and things like that. I've been a little bit reticent to do that. I have finally opted to do that in this way. So if you want to support my content, please do check out my Medify page. There are several tiers. You can do whatever you'd like on those tiers. Of course, thank you to everyone who watches. Thank you to everyone who likes and to everyone who subscribes. And I guess kind of to the people that don't, but like a little bit less. You know what I mean? Just a little bit less. All right, y'all. We're going to get into the gameplay now. Have a good one. You've been phenomenal. I will see you in the next one. Me not be stupid. The move was KM isn't an idiot. Forgot. Is there a chance it's Destroyer? There absolutely is. So the play around to Destroyer, for the record, was just go above a Nimrod's power level in multiple lanes. You can say no, it's okay. I could. We might do it, though, is the thing. Not going for the card draw because it's kitty. Okay. Whoa. Random Hawkeye is nuts. Oh, but this is even more nuts. Damn, dude. Come on, can they lose this, please? Whoa. Of course they didn't lose it. I really want to get this Luke Cage out, I think. Holy fuck! So I have Magento Alioth, if I want it. Or I have any number of other things. What if it's just Magento? Boy. Fucking cable coming in hot over here, dude. Well, and it is exactly as dope as you think it is. We lost our Wixie, by the way. Sad. My day's alright. We're gonna be doing a lot of just random Silver Sable gaming today. A place for Wiccan in the Wiccan deck? No, I don't think so. I think what you're asking for might not exist. Is Magneto better than Hulkling? I believe so, yeah. Genuine question, why not Snap here? If they were just a bounce deck, I would. At this, I just don't know. They might get some beasts that allow them to play zeros. Okay, they have zeros on those. That's better than the alternative. Oh, Mobius makes them not zero. Oh! Oh, I definitely should have snapped. What the fuck am I doing? I can't... That's kind of nice. We got a 310. If it's Nimrod stuff, they already used Carnage Venom, and I feel like I'm good. Absolutely fucking not, dude. No way. Get the fuck out of here. You play Loki at all anymore? I mean, it's not very good, so no. I played a good decks. That's my thing. That's what I do. Of course, that's the card that gets given the thing. Alright, wonderful. Alright, top cards. Is that a Mr. Negative? Could be Alioth. Could be Wiccan. Oh, it's no longer Wiccan. Oh, okay, okay. Mirage ain't bad. Wait, if that's Nomura, am I just dead? No, we totally lose to Nomura. I'm fucking stupid. What if they don't have Nomura? Did we do it? Did we fucking do it? Let's go! Let's go! I love Big Baby, but his variant taste is abhorrent. Agree. Hey! I don't know what I'm gonna do with that, but hopefully it's something. With all due respect, this is one of the worst Rian variants. I think that's a pretty bad take, honestly. I genuinely just think that's a bad take. I want a one-drop out of their shit, hopefully. Is this fucking Goon Knight? It is Goon Knight. We're gooning, dude. Procs. Yes! I'm so goated, dude. Oh my god, Mirage is the best. The fucking best. Holy shit. So it's 10. They have 10. I mean, it's just a guess, right? We just guess where they're going. It's a pure 50-50. Or is there a way to play around it with, like, Speed Pixie? They beat Alioth, right? Yes, if they go Dark Hawk and Sage there. It's like Alioth, if we Alioth right, they can go Stature Mystique. How do they have Hawk? Mystique. A card Mystique. Hope I got it right. Looks like I did. I mean, why would